If now my attention is on your right hand, are you going to fool me with something that is on the left hand?
I did it actually a while ago when I was reaching into your pocket. I used that half circle motion to come out of your pocket. And at the same time, I removed with the other hand. And it is kind of instinctual. It is something, from what I've heard, it's like there's two eye movements. There's what's called smooth pursuits, where we chase things. And then there's saccadic movements, where we're looking back and forth between 2 points. And the ability, again, is that connecting the dots. You look back and forth, it's very quickly, but this one engages you more. And so when I pull out something like a shrimp or something like that, and I combine that with a move, you're mine. And that allows me to do that. That allows me to pull the items out, and it becomes more important to you. If you step back, I think one of the things that's very interesting, when you look at all this massive data that comes in from our senses, and that it all has to come into the central point, it's really interesting if we can identify the filter that our mind is using to select what it's going to think is relevant and what it's going to forget. And how does it do that? So if you can bias that, or if you can figure out how that prioritizes, you can change someone's reality. Because you can now frame how their filter works and what the lens is. And I think that that's a very, it kind of goes back to the theme of what this whole series is about.
It's very interesting because the smooth pursuit that you mentioned is actually effortful, right? So for me to trace something, I'm doing it with a lot of effort.
Yes.
So if we talk about those mental dollars that you were talking about, or
yeah.
the bioenergetic cost that I was talking about, we are really engaged in that, right? Whereas the saccadic movements are the movements that we do when we read. We don't have to program them carefully, right?
Yeah.
Saccade means like a jump. It's a jump, and we do that about every 250 milliseconds or so where we read. But there's not a lot of attention invested in that because it's such an automatic movement. And it's a movement that we do most of the time when we look from one place to the other, right? Unless there's something interesting that you really need to concentrate on, you're not going to be doing that smooth pursuit.
Yeah.
And I find interesting when I read that actually, I mean, the intuition seems so simple, but no scientists had proved that until you gave them that intuition.
If I could add a note on that, there's something outside of magic. So Posner in 1990 formed this concept of the 3 steps, 3 processes of attention. In the 50s, John Boyd, who's a fighter pilot, had an interesting thing he called the OODA loop, which was OODA, stood for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And became the foundation for a lot of military maneuvers and thinking, how do you interact with another person? You observe, you orient yourself based on your knowledge base to what you just observed, you make a decision, and then you act. And when you act, the other person observes, and it's a loop cycle, back and forth. And this kind of extended to social interactions. Now it's taught in business in different areas. But what I'm saying is, this was instinctual. He wasn't a scientist. But there's a lot of these relationships that I think are kind of symbiotic, going back and forth, of how we can help each other.